Hello, this is Professor Stugard, and today we're going to talk about problem solving, and specifically how to apply problem solving to word problems that we're going to encounter in intermediate algebra. When we're problem solving, typically we want to follow this simple four-step process. The first thing is always to define what it is we're trying to look for. Try to define the problem. What am I trying to solve? What is the issue? Because if we don't understand what the problem is first, well, we can't really do anything else. The second step is to translate. Basically, what do you already know about the problem? Gather your data, figure out what you already know, and see if that can help you with the next step, which is to actually solve. And you're going to take that information that you found with the fact that you know what you're looking for from the first step, and hopefully come to some sort of reasonable conclusion. And then the last part is to answer in a clear manner. You could be the smartest person in the world and have all the right answers, but if you can't communicate that to someone else, no one's going to listen. And with this in mind, you might even begin to understand why at every single college there are two courses required for everybody regardless of your major, and that's English and math. Because you need to be able to read if you want to be able to define what it is you're looking for and try to translate. You need to use, hopefully, logical thinking, which would be math for the solving step. And then you need to answer. You need to be able to communicate. Again, going back to English. Now, in the context of math word problems, we're going to use this four-step process, but we can be a little bit more specific. So the first step, that defining step, well, what is the question specifically asking for? Take the time to actually write this out as its own formal step. Make sure you know exactly what the question's asking you to find. You may have to read the question a few times first. That's fine. Make sure you know what it's looking for, and then label it with some sort of variable or unknown. And in the context of this class, we're only going to use just one variable. But while that quantity is unknown, we're going to use our unknown and our variable. Step 2 is translating. Well, what is the question telling you? You're just given this whole problem that's got a paragraph worth of English sentences. It's your job now to make sense of those English sentences by translating those to math equations. It might also be useful to list formulas or draw pictures, make diagrams, basically anything that might be useful to help you actually solve this problem. And then to solve, well, you're going to use algebra. This is an algebra class. This is the actual part where you're doing math. And then the last step is to answer. And we want to make sure that we always answer our question in English with the proper units. If the question is asked in English, your answer is in English. It should be very consistent. For someone who has absolutely no mathematical knowledge whatsoever, they should be able to read the question that was asked and read your answer and have no question whatsoever about what's going on. I just want to focus today on doing an area problem with you. And so when we're doing area problems, we're looking at two different shapes, which have two slightly different formulas. The first one is a rectangle. The area of a rectangle is its length times its width, which we typically shorthand as A equals L times W, or just LW. For a triangle, the formula that everyone is taught way back in like 10th grade geometry, or, well, who knows when you took any class that told you what the area of a triangle is, but we always hear that the area of a triangle is 1/2 the base times the height, or base times height divided by 2, or a myriad of other ways. Except, do you like fractions? Do you want to work with extra fractions in your problem? And I'm guessing you just answered no, because nobody wants to work with extra fractions. So the much better thing to do is that instead of saying it's 1/2 of the base, we're going to get rid of that 1/2, and it's an equation, so what we have to do is that's to be balanced on both sides, and basically to undo a 1/2, we need to double, right? The opposite of taking a 1/2 of something is doubling something, so if I want to undo that 1/2 of my base, I actually need to double both sides, and so double the area, or 2 times the area, equals base times my height. And I highly, highly recommend that you use that formula from here on out because it will make your life so much easier when doing these sorts of problems. Speaking of these sorts of problems, let's work through an example. So the question we're looking at is that the area of a triangle is 18 square inches. The height is 5 inches less than the base. Find the length and the base, length of the base and the height. All right, so read through the question. All right, well, the first step, define. What is it that I'm looking for here? Well, the best thing to do is to actually look for the question part of this question. What sentence is actually telling us to find something, or which sentence ends with a question mark? Boom, it's the last one. It has the word find right there. What is the question asking me to find? It asks me to find the length of the base and the height. So even though I see the phrase the length in there, it's the length of the base and the height. So it looks like I'm actually looking for two things in this problem. I'm looking for the base and I'm looking for the height. All right, so halfway done step one. Now, because these are our unknowns, well, we're going to use variables, and let's use the variable x. So I'm going to say that the base is x, and I'm just going to start there. Now, one of the keys to solving these word problems, and again, making your life way, way easier, is that we only ever want to use one variable. If the base is x, I don't want to start throwing in y's or other letters here. I want to try to be consistent. If I can use just one variable, well, then the rest of the problem is going to go much better. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of translating here as well. So let's see. If I say the base is x, I have to look for some sort of sentence in here that's going to relate the base and the height together. Well, there it is. It's my second sentence. The height is 5 inches less than the base. So 5 inches less, that means you're taking 5 away. So my base was originally x. I'm taking those 5 inches away, which means subtracting 5. And again, I want to make a giant note here. We only want to use one variable. Okay, so now that we know exactly what we're looking for and we gave it a variable name, it's time for the second step. Let's translate. So, looking at this problem, I already translated a little bit actually with having to label and define what it was I'm looking for. But now I want to see, well, the very first sentence is that I'm looking at the area of a triangle. And luckily I have that formula memorized from earlier, where 2 times the area equals the base times the height. And now we just plug in what we know. The area, or A, was 18. B for the base was x, and h for the height was x minus 5. And we're done. We've translated. We've actually done half of this problem already. Now the next step is we're actually going to go ahead and solve. So we take that equation that, well, we just came up with from the translating step, and I have to solve. Now the first thing that jumps out at me is I see parentheses. So we got to clear those parentheses, which means distribute and multiply. So 2 times 18, 36. And if I distribute that x times x is x squared, and x times minus 5 is minus 5x. All right. Now, the next step. I see an x squared, which means I know I'm going to have to set everything to 0 to eventually use my zero product property. Now, we could do this, I guess, more than one way, but the easiest thing here is probably just subtract that 36 from both sides. All right, because 36 minus 36 will give me 0. And on that right-hand side, though, when I subtract the 36, there's no other constants. There's no other just numbers to subtract that from, so there's nothing to do with that minus 36 except just, well, write it at the end. So now we need to solve that 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 36. And the way we're going to do this is to factor. So we now need to factor that polynomial. So do the AC method, take your time, pause the video, and actually go ahead and factor this on your own. All right. This video is not about factoring, so I'm just going to give you the answer in just a second. But seriously, pause. Take the time. Make sure you understand the concept. Did you actually try it? Well, stop and actually try the problem. Well, or don't. I'm a video, not a cop. When I factor, I should get the factorization x minus 9, x plus 4, or maybe swapped depending on how you set up the whole thing. And then that zero product property means that if I have a 0 on one side and a product or a multiplication problem on the right-hand side, I actually get to solve 2 smaller, simpler problems mainly each of those sets in parentheses set equal to 0. So x minus 9 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. Now those are pretty easy to solve, right? Add 9 to both sides for the first one, x equals 9. Subtract 4 from both sides, x is negative 4. So I get x equals 9 and x equals negative 4. What do these solutions actually mean, though? Well, my question wanted two numbers. Are those my two numbers? Am I done? Well, not exactly. And this is why if you took the time to actually write out that first step where you labeled, well, you just did yourself a huge favor. Because if I go back to that defining step, the base was x. Well, I just solved for x, which means I just found two possible solutions for just the base. That's all I did. X equals 9 and x equals negative 4 are my two possible solutions for the base of my triangle. That's not the answer to my question just yet. So I get my two solutions, x equals 9 and x equals negative 4, and those are my base. And I need to figure out, well, what's my height going to be? Well, we'll get there. First things first, though, one of my solutions is not going to work. It's an extraneous solution, or basically an answer that doesn't make sense. And since I'm talking about a triangle, and I'm trying to find how long the base and the height are, I could measure a triangle with a ruler. But what's the last ruler you saw that had negative 4 inches? Well, you didn't, because negative 4 doesn't make sense in the context of a length. So I can immediately cross that out. And basically, any time that we're dealing with a problem that is with shapes, so triangles or rectangles or anything else, if we end up with a negative answer, that's an issue because there's no such thing as having a negative when it comes to our shapes. So I know that x equals 9, which is my base. How do I find my height? Well, we know that the height was x minus 5 from earlier, which means it's really 9 minus 5, which is 4. My height is 4. The last step is to, of course, answer my question. And so to answer this question, the base is 9 inches, the height is 4 inches. And again, just make sure that you're very careful about your units. And that's it. And we've wrapped up this problem. So to recap, when we're problem solving, always make sure to step 1, define what it is you're looking for. And in the context of a math problem, give it a variable name. And you can use x. You can use any letter you want, but make sure you give it a variable name and are very specific about what you're looking for. Step 2, translate. What do you know? What is the question telling you? What formulas can you pull from? How can I actually solve this problem effectively? Step 3 is to, actually solve, right? Actually take that equation that you figured out in the translating step and solve it using algebra. And then the last part is to answer. Make sure you answer in a clear manner with units. So I hope this has been helpful. Good luck on your homework. And let me know if you have any questions.